Hey everyone, it's Kristan Hawkins. Welcome to the first episode of my new podcast, Explicitly Pro-Life. I'm so excited that we're finally debuting this podcast because there's so much we have to talk about and there's so many things we have to discuss. And so I hope you're going to start tuning into the podcast. We're going to go over latest news within the pro-life movement, what we're seeing nationally in Washington, D.C. and states across the country. And we're also, I'm hopeful that when you and I discuss these things and we know what's coming up, that I'm able to give you some marching orders. So you know how to go back to your community, back to your states, and how to take action to save lives and help us accomplish our mission of abolishing abortion in our lifetime. So today I want to talk about what's been going on in states across the country. I know often when we talk about the pro-life movement and the pro-life movement focuses our attention, we tend to focus our attention and we send our money and our efforts always to Washington, D.C., to what's going on within the United States Capitol, right? What's being passed in the House of Representatives, or in our case right now, not passed in the House of Representatives, what the president's doing. But what you may not know is that most of the life-saving measures that we've seen passed in states across our country are coming from states. It's actually happening within the state legislature. That's where we're seeing the most life-saving measures passed, the most measures being passed to protect women from the predatory abortion industry. So today we're going to dive into that a little bit. We're going to talk about what's going on in states across the country, things that I know that are going on just with our work with Students for Life and where the pro-life generation has been active. So thanks for tuning in. All right, so let's get started and let's dive right in. I've got my laptop up, so I'm going to be pulling up some different things for us to look at and talk about today. The first thing I really want to talk about is, especially when I tour the country and I speak to adult audiences, I often tell people we're winning, that we have the momentum in our country. And I use, Students for Life of America's own polls, the Mars polls, even Pew and Gallup polls. I talk about, the March for Life and how our movement is the only movement in the history of the world, like no other social movement in the history of the world turns out more people annually than the American March for Life. I talk about, how we're kicking their butts on the college campuses and in high schools. Planned Parenthood last year in their own annual report actually had the audacity, I guess you could say, to brag that they started 50 pro-abortion groups in colleges and they had trained 700 students in that 1 year. And our organization, Students for Life, is nowhere near the billion-dollar enterprise of Planned Parenthood, though I wish we were. But we kicked their butts. We had over 100 new Students for Life groups started last year alone. I think the number was like 130 or so. We trained more than 11,000 students, 11,000 members of the pro-life generation. So we do have this momentum, and I see it. I have the privilege and honor to see it when I'm on college campuses, having discussions with students. Our team sees, our regional coordinators who are out there right now in our Planned Parenthood Truth Tour see it. But I think it's difficult for older folks who've been in the pro-life movement for 40 plus years, who go to the Right to Life banquet or the pregnancy center banquet once a year, and they watch Fox or CNN. I think it's hard for them to see the momentum that we have. And what's been going on within New York State and in Virginia and in Vermont and now Rhode Island, I think it's very easy for people to be discouraged. Very soon into the new year, New York State passed the RHA Act, the Reproductive Health Act. This bill allows abortion in all 9 months of pregnancy. It allows for medical professional. Well, it doesn't punish, I guess, medical professionals who don't treat children who are born from a failed abortion. So children who are born alive after a failed abortion attempt, they won't be held criminally liable if they refuse to give that child life sustaining care like oxygen. And so, I mean, that bill is horrific. It's horrific. It actually even repealed. I was reading a news article just a couple weeks after it passed. It repealed the protections on pregnant women who are murdered during pregnancy. And so instead of the murderer being charged with two murders, the pregnant woman and her child, now the murderer will only be charged with one murder. And I think the second charge is like an illegal abortion or something. And that actually did happen not too long after the RHA Act was passed. There was a woman who was stabbed, which we know in the pro-life movement, the most dangerous time for a woman is actually when she's pregnant. That's like your greatest chance of being murdered in your life, which is shocking, I think, for all of us. But it's sad that we've seen this time and time again. So, I mean, we had this RHA Act that was passed, and I think people were shocked when they saw that video of, the pro-abortion, lobbyists there in Albany and the legislators cheering. And then the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, ordered that all the state, iconic buildings be lit up in pink to celebrate, this horrendous passing of RHA. And, what really got me, yeah, and we knew it was coming, but what really shook me was when the One World Trade Center, the World Trade Center that was rebuilt on the grounds of where the Twin Towers stood, that actually have in their memorial, they have, I think it's 11 or 12 preborn babies listed on their memorial as victims of the 9/11 attacks there, the Twin Towers, for that building to be lit up in pink. I mean, that just, it set me off for sure. And I'm someone who does this every day. Right. And I think I get desensitized to the issue. I get desensitized to the issue of abortion. Because I'm in this fight. And I think a lot of people who are in the pro-life movement would agree that, when you're in this fight daily, you can kind of forget what's going on. You can kind of, stop thinking about the actual abortions are taking place, or that, how horrific these laws are. And so that's what really got me. And I got so many Americans upset because, we saw, just in response to what happened in New York, we had several students at Students for Life actually reach out to us saying, we've been on your email list for a while. I've been following you on social media for a while. Now I have to do something. In fact, our team actually just interviewed a job candidate. I don't know if we've offered her the job or we are, I'm not sure. But our vice president, Tina, was telling me that they had asked this woman why she was interviewing for a job, and I think she's in the healthcare field right now, and she cited this, Reproductive Health Act in New York State as the reason for. She knew at that moment she couldn't be on the sidelines anymore. That she had to stand up and do something, even that means it's something radical like changing her entire career and moving into the very lucrative pro-life movement. We say that jokingly, obviously, for people who aren't listening to or watching the video. So I think, this RHA, there's these unintended side effects that we've seen. There was a poll just released, I think it was a Morris poll, a couple weeks after the New York State law was passed, where it showed that Democrats, I think, that self-identified as pro-life went from like the 30s to the 40s range, or the 20s to the 30 range. There was like a 10% shift, which is significant. And so the question, I get is, well, do we really have this momentum if, what happened in New York State happened, right? And I think we have to realize that what happened in New York State wasn't like new. This was something that's been brewing for a number of years. Actually, this Reproductive Health Act, RHA, was introduced, I believe, in 2010. And it's been brewing for 8-9 years. And it was actually state elections that kept this at bay. But when Republicans, there was a big defeat for the remaining Republicans there in New York this November. And that's actually the November 2018 election is actually what gave the pro-abortion industry the seats, the votes they needed to pass this law, which, by the way, is why state elections matter. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So, this law isn't new. It's been brewing for a while. Governor Cuomo actually, in one of his statements as to justifying this extremism on abortion, he specifically cited Roe and the reversal of Roe, the coming reversal of Roe, which I thought was really interesting because when we launched Students for Life. 12 and a half years ago, almost 13 years ago, I would often, when I was in DC or I was at like events with potential supporters, I would call ourselves a post-Roe organization and saying, look, we're building up the pro-life generation for the day Roe is overturned. We have to have dedicated, trained activists, leaders in the states, because, when Roe's overturned, we have 50 simultaneous state battles. And I remember I was at this event in New York City, and the feedback I got from some of our supporters after the event was, maybe you shouldn't have said post Roe, and maybe you shouldn't have said, abolish abortion so much. I think it was very scary for the people who were here. And that was kind of the feedback that we got, was that, we weren't really supposed to talk about overturning Roe because a lot of people didn't think it was possible. So when they would hear somebody like me say it, I just sounded young, naive, and I didn't know what I was talking about. And it was a little scary, right? But it's been interesting that now everyone's talking about, and I think we're going to do an episode on this very soon of, post-Roe America, what that's going to look like. But I think that it was very telling for me that the governor of New York actually said, like, he wanted to pass RHA, the Reproductive Health Act, because he is afraid of Roe versus Wade being reversed. And I mean, I've done several news interviews on post-Roe America in the past couple months. And so this is a significant shift. I mean, this actually signals and proves my point that we do have the momentum in the pro-life movement. Now we're actually, 43 plus years in, 44 years, we're now talking about living in a post-Roe America, and states are preparing for the post-Roe reality. That's significant, and that's momentum. And so I think you can see the reason why they're, in New York and now in Vermont, there's a constitutional amendment that will guarantee abortion. Rhode Island is trying to pass a very similar bill to New York State. I've heard Illinois, I know Illinois is actually trying to pass a bill even more extreme than New York State. I've heard rumors that Connie Leyva, the senator there in California, who is a sponsor of SB 24, the Abortion Pill on Campus Act, which we'll talk about soon. She wants to introduce a similar bill. What's happening is states that are pro-abortion, extreme pro-abortion states, they're going to shore up their ground and their territory. And I do think kind of this is a good thing for the movement, because it's actually showing America the extremism of the abortion industry. Because you and I know, like, the reason why abortion is still legal in our country is because America doesn't see abortion. If we saw the broken bodies of 2,600 preborn baby girls and baby boys on the street every night, when we turned on the nightly news, every American, no matter what, faith background, no matter what political background, would demand that we would end the atrocity of abortion. But because it happens behind the closed doors of the Planned Parenthood, because we use, sanitized language like reproductive rights instead of killing a preborn human child, we've allowed this to go on. And so when states pass these extremist laws, people are shocked. Americans are shocked because the majority of Americans don't even know abortion is legal in all 9 months of pregnancy. Our polling at Students for Life has indicated this. I have anecdotal, everyone who works at Students for Life has anecdotal experience of this, of actually trying to argue with people on campus that abortion is actually legal late in pregnancy. And so when things like this happen, what happened in New York State, it shocks the conscience of Americans, and it gets them thinking about abortion, something that no one wants to think about, right? I mean, this is why abortion happens: is it's done behind closed doors. We use sanitized language. We dehumanize the preborn language, and no one really wants to think about it anyway. I mean, this is what makes me like the worst person ever to invite to a dinner party, because I talk about like everything you're not supposed to talk about: abortion, politics, and religion, and usually there's a few curse words thrown into there. So I mean, this is what we're dealing with. So yeah, what happened in New York State was tragic. But I actually think when we look back in the history of abortion and we write the kind of how Roe fell, I think that's going to be a significant moment. They're in Virginia, right? So shortly after this passed, Delegate Kathy Tram in Virginia proposed a similar bill to New York's bill, not as extreme, but a similar bill. Had no chance in hell of passing. We all knew that. But thankfully, the state legislator, one of the Republican legislators, actually got her on record and on video having to say what her bill actually would do. Allowing abortion in all 9 months. And then, to try to defend the bill, the idiotic governor of Virginia, I mean, the racist governor of Virginia, Governor Northam, goes on I think it was a state public radio or something like that, goes on public radio and like defends the bill, which has no chance in hell of passing. And then goes so far as to say, well, if a baby's born alive during abortion, there's a discussion that has to ensue, but basically goes on record stating that he's in favor of doctors withholding life-sustaining medical care to infants who survive an abortion. That's called infanticide or murder. And so he just like digs himself into his own hole here. And then, we had a med student, a fellow med student of his who got so upset by his statements about infanticide, who then released the yearbook from medical school showing the governor either dressed in blackface or as a Ku Klux Klan member. I don't even think I know which one he was, or I don't even think he said which one he was, but either way, it was really bad. And he still hasn't resigned. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. I think, that speaks for itself. But what's interesting in Virginia is the state of Virginia actually has had, they had some court-ordered redistricting going on. And I was told a University of California, Berkeley professor was able to redistrict the state of Virginia. I have no idea how the hell a California professor got to redistrict the state of Virginia. I don't know how this happened. This is just what I was told. But they redistrict the state. Now, shock, the redistricting is not in the Republicans' favor. And so like the House Speaker, I think, or one of the leaders in the House, his district, this is how bad it was. It is predicted it's going to go 30 points in the Democratic direction in this one district. And so the folks I've been speaking to on the ground leading up to this year, before everything with Kathy Tram and her bill, and Governor Northam and his infanticide statements, and now racist history have been uncovered, and don't even get me started about the lieutenant governor. Well, we were told that like Republicans were going to lose both chambers there in Virginia, which is going to be bad because the governor and lieutenant governor for the past several years have been Democrat, but it's been the legislature there in Virginia that's retained GOP, Republican control, pro-life control, that stopped a lot of the craziness that you've seen in other states. But I actually think because of Kathy Tram's bill, because you had I think it was 20 some senators, Democrats signed on, a lot of them, delegates who signed on to her bill were actually freshmen. Because of this, I actually think, and a lot of people do agree, it's not just me pontificating, do agree that, we'll probably, the GOP, the Republicans will probably retain control of at least one chamber. And so that's huge and that's significant. So once again, we're going to see momentum in Virginia, and actually Students for Life, we launched a sister organization in February called Students for Life Action. My goal for our 501c4, Students for Life Action, I didn't really want to do anything to it until this summer, until I had some more breathing room, until my speaking tour was done, our Planned Parenthood Truth Tour was done on all the campuses. But I was so angry about what happened in New York State, what happened in Virginia. We went ahead and launched it with our board. The board gave me the time, the okay to go ahead and set it up. And so now we actually have a 501c4 organization, Students for Life. It's called Students for Life Action. It's the same initials, SFLA, so it's actually really easy to remember. But we're going to be going with the 501c4. We're going to be focusing on state elections. Virginia is actually going to be our first testing ground. We're going to be sending a Virginia field director in, and we're going to be lid dropping churches and informing Virginia constituents who actually sponsor this horrific bill of Catholic trams and who support infanticide and abortion all 9 months. And so I think, we're going to have momentum there. And I think, what happened to Virginia might end up being a blessing in disguise for the pro-life movement and the conservative movement, if you're a conservative. So you've got New York, you've got Virginia. Like I said, we've got Rhode Island, Vermont, and Illinois, all kind of passing similar laws. Or trying to pass similar laws. I don't think anything has actually been passed yet. We're still kind of working our way through the spring legislative session. A lot of things have passed one chamber, but they haven't passed the other chamber. You've got California kind of considering it. So the question I've had, a couple people have asked me, they've said, why? Why are they doing this now? Beyond the Roe question, right? There was a document that David B. Wright, founder of 40 Days for Life, a good friend and mentor of mine, pointed to me this summer. And I believe Carol Everett's groups was the one who kind of uncovered it, but it was the Reproductive Healthcare Investors Alliance. They had released a report last October, so in October of 2017, and it was basically a SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunities, threats analysis of the pro-abortion landscape of the pro-abortion movement, and it was it's about 90 pages. I have it here somewhere. They make me take my papers down before I do the podcast, so you don't see how messy my life and my brain is. But I have it right here somewhere. But it's 90 pages, page 8 or 7, right off the bat. They say their goal is to increase supply and demand of abortion and birth control. Supply and demand. So next time someone says oh, we don't really want abortion. Yeah. Okay. So they go through this goal and it's a fascinating report if you're in the pro-life movement. I think Live Action did an article about Carol Everett's group who found it. So you can find it on Google. But the report is interesting because one of the biggest weaknesses they identified within their movement was state level legislation, saying look, we're getting our butts kicked here on state level legislation. And so I think that's why you've started seeing a lot of states kind of ramping up. The pro-abortion industry is paying more attention to state level politics than they have ever before. And I think that's another reason beyond the fear of the Roe reversal is this: we have to do more. I mean, you've got there's been more than 300 or 400 pieces of legislation, pro-life legislation, that ban abortions, heavily restrict abortions, that defund Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, that have been passed in states since 2010. I mean, that's hundreds of bills. And so they know they're losing there. And one of the things they identified in this Reproductive Healthcare Investors Alliance report, what is that? Reproductive Healthcare, RHIA. They said that state level efforts to defund the abortion industry was one of their biggest things they were going to pay attention to, which obviously we know because the abortion industry needs our tax dollars to continue to pad their pockets, right? So, and what was really cool, if you look in Ohio, Ohio passed a law to, defund Planned Parenthood and abortion vendors in their state. And then actually it was upheld, because of course, anytime those laws are passed, immediately Planned Parenthood goes to a judge and gets an injunction or whatever. But in the Ohio case, actually, they just upheld it not too long ago. And I think it's over $1 million that they're going to lose, 1.5 million of annual support that they're going to lose. That's significant. So, I mean, these state laws matter and state legislation matters. And that means state elections matter. Another state we could talk about, and I think it's interesting to look at, is Washington State. Washington State is interesting for me because it's actually what gave myself and Brendan O'Morrow, who used to work for Students for Life, who doesn't work for us anymore. He's still the godfather of my children, but he is actually on our board of our Students for Life Action, our C4. Washington State is what gave us kind of the idea of we need to do more. We need to get our pro-life generation, all these student leaders. They're so courageous on campus who do all of this work, saving lives and transforming the culture on their campus to get leaders out there in campaigns to do more within their state, politics and even in federal politics, because this is a key area for the pro-life movement. It's not, the pro-life issue is not a political issue. I get so mad when people say that. Like, it is not a political issue. This is a human rights issue. I mean, full stop. This is a human rights issue. It is not a freaking political issue. However, politics is one way we serve and is one way we engage, just like pregnancy centers and maternity homes. That's another way we serve, another way we engage to take down the abortion industry. But Washington State's interesting because a couple of years ago there was a state house race, and we were contacted by a supporter who asked us to get involved, and of course we couldn't. Students for Life of America, we're a 501c3 organization, which means deduction, you can get a tax deduction for donating to us, but we can't engage in the political, right? We can't endorse politicians, lawmakers. We can't tell people who to vote for. We have to even now be careful, just highlighting people's records, politicians' records on abortion. But in Washington State, there was a race where literally the control of the state house was dependent on the special election race, and no one was really paying attention to it. No national group was giving money for it. It probably would have taken $25,000 to go into this district, bring out pro-life students and to engage. And had we won, and had this person won, the Republicans would have controlled one of the state houses, which is actually would have stopped about 3 horrific pieces of pro-abortion legislation that were passed in Washington State last year. But they lost, Republicans lost, and the Democrat won, and pro-abortion politics was the victor, right? So the Washington State actually passed 3 horrific, pro-abortion pieces of legislation last year. And so that was really what gave Brendan and I we have to get on to do this, because had we been able to engage, had we only get the pro-life generation active, we could have saved a lot of lives. We may not have delayed the Washington State House from forever being pro-abortion and being in Democrat hands, but we could have delayed it for a year, and we could have saved lives for that year. And so, in the name of the game of the pro-life movement, it's save as many as you can, right? We're in a constant battle to save as many as we possibly can. But in Washington State right now, there's a couple of different laws that we've been focusing on, and actually our Students for Life leaders have been going to testify. And sadly in Washington, like a lot of times, it's only the pro-life students you'll see testifying. They're actually trying to mandate a state sex ed curriculum, which is going to allow Planned Parenthood basically to come in and write the sex ed curriculum starting in kindergarten. It will be comprehensive, meaning that it's not just gonna be like a special class. It's gonna be like throughout their curriculum. So parents won't be able to just say, well, I don't want my kid to participate. Like, you won't be able to do that. And so that's coming up in Washington State right now. I'm not even sure. I haven't seen if there's been a vote on that. Let me check my tracker right now. There was a House committee hearing not long ago on this, so it hasn't moved forward, thankfully, yet, or hasn't been passed. There's also another bill in Washington State which requires health plans to fund, abortions. Yeah, so this is Eliminating Barriers to Reproductive Health Care Act. So this is a new law that require health plans, including student health plans, to cover all contraceptive devices and drugs, possibly abortions approved for the FDA, for the covered person and partner, regardless of their gender or identity or immigration status. Okay, so this immigration one hasn't been passed yet. This is similar to what's been already passed in Oregon. So those are 2 laws that we're paying attention to in Washington State. I mean, this is this is about as liberal as pro-abortion as you can get. And I'm sorry if you're a Democrat, by the way, and you listen to this, because anytime you talk about state politics and abortion, like a lot of times Democrat and pro-abortion are the same word. So apologies. I'm not saying that all Democrats are pro-abortion, and obviously we want Democrats to be pro-life. That's actually how we're going to win in our country, is when we have, not only the Republican Party leading the charge, but now then we have a significant majority of Democrats who demand that their party no longer have their horrific stance of abortion, their platform demanding abortion all 9 months for whatever reason, taxpayer funded. But that's another whole podcast. So Washington State got some horrendous stuff going on. There's also an interesting situation in Washington State. It's not on like state legislation, I guess, per se, but something we're engaging on. I'm really excited about because I think we can have a victory here, and this is an important place to take a stand. Obviously, there's a school-based health clinics that are, Planned Parenthood is getting a lot of money federally for school-based health clinics, and this was part of Obamacare. They can go into schools and set up, health centers. So there's a school a couple hours north of Seattle in a pretty conservative area. We actually have a lot of supporters in the area. Katie Logic, our Washington region coordinator, actually lives in the area, is from the area. But essentially, in this situation, Planned Parenthood is partnering with the local Catholic hospital. Let me say that again. Planned Parenthood, an abortion vendor, is partnering with a local Catholic hospital to put a school-based health clinic into their public high school, which obviously is going to refer students to Planned Parenthood, further build a relationship with Planned Parenthood and the predatory business cycle, create a customer cycle that they have for students. So that's going on. We're going to the hospital. We're going to Christians, across the county. We're going to everyone, telling them about this, about what Planned Parenthood's doing, what their real motivation, their real agenda is. So hopefully we're able to stop that. We were able to stop a similar situation in Reading, PA, just 2 summers ago, where Planned Parenthood was going to put a full-time staff member inside of Reading High School. This was a staffer from the Planned Parenthood in Allentown, PA, which had already been cited from the state. So after Kermit Gosnell, they started, investigating their abortion facilities a little bit, and found that they had multiple health and safety violations. So Washington State is a state definitely to pay attention to. And it's a state where you can have victories, even as liberal and as pro-abortion is. There are victories that happen. There was a kind of a cool victory the other day where our students for life leaders went to lobby, and they were the pro-lifers, and the pro-aborts who were there in their pink T-shirts were all old white men. That was a narrative victory for us, for sure. That was totally a narrative victory. Carly Logic, our Students for Life fellow there in Washington, she's Katie's sister, but they're both amazing. She actually is working with other students, and for her Students for Life fellowship project, they've actually gone to the state capitol and they filed a parental notification bill. They want to have it on the ballot, so a ballot vote on parental notification there in Washington State, and that's going to be led by pro-life students. So be on the lookout for more information on that. Okay, we've got other states we can talk about. Maryland had a big assisted suicide vote. We were expecting it to pass. So I know the students at Towson actually went with Stephanie, our regional coordinator, to Annapolis, lobbied and testified against the bill. It actually died. We won, which is significant. You've got North Dakota is working on several bills. The Students for Life from University of Marion there in Bismarck, actually, we had to get some of them registered as lobbyists for the state. They're working on a few things. They passed the dismemberment bill, so that bans abortions that dismember babies. I think it's like 14 or 15 weeks. So that has passed. I think it's awaiting governor's signature on it. So that's ongoing, and the students were able to testify there. They actually also testified in something else. We're trying to pass a resolution in New York State and I'm sorry, not New York State, North Dakota, that would essentially say that the state acknowledges that the deadline to pass ERA has already happened and it has failed, because that's a new thing right now that we're fighting. I just had a Capitol Hill briefing on, and we've seen it in states yesterday. Elizabeth, our St. Louis region coordinator, testified in Jefferson City, Missouri. When you look at the ERA, and I don't know how many of you all followed ERA. I remember the ERA from like 7th grade or 8th grade history, like at the end of the school year, after you get through World War II, you would have like 2 weeks left to like go through all history from World War II until present time. That's why, if you want to know why millennials don't know why communism is bad, is because they don't know. They're actually not being taught, because we just go through World War II in social studies class, and we never talk about communism. But anyway, once again, another podcast topic we can talk about. But I remember in history, there was like a picture of Phyllis Schlafly, and it was like, there would be like, I would always read ahead. And we would never get to this part in social studies because we had to start studying and cramming for the state, testing things that we had to do. But there was a picture of Phyllis Schlafly and like this no on ERA sign. So it's totally something from the history book. So the ERA essentially, Alice Paul, the suffragist. She was the writer, the founder of the ERA, who was actually pro-life, who said abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women. The ERA was supposed to be amended, put into the Constitution to say that women and men are equal, which is something we already know. And in the 70s, it became like this big thing, like we're going to pass ERA. Second wave feminism took it up. We need our ERA. It's interesting, like, I actually do think there was a time when ERA, the protections it might have afforded, would have been needed, but it's actually not necessary now. The Supreme Court in early 70s in Reed versus Reed found that the 14th Amendment applied to men and women, not just men, that we were equal under the law. There's been all of these laws that have been passed, the Pregnancy Non-Discrimination Act, Title IX. There's been all these laws that have been passed. The Civil Rights Act actually had prevented gender discrimination in it. There was a Fair Wages Act. So there's been all these laws that have been passed. So if you would pass ERA, all those laws now would be undone, because those laws actually mention gender, and ERA would say anything that mentions gender essentially would be undone. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, not a pro-life advocate at all, has actually wrote in one of her books that the ERA would undo about 800 pieces of federal legislation that she knew of and statutes. So the ERA, like, it kind of just, there was a deadline to pass. And if you ever watched Iron Jawed Angels about Alice Paul and how they got the 19th Amendment passed, is a really good movie. My husband would make his students in social studies class watch it, because it's a good study, and kind of shows you the effort to get a constitutional amendment passed, right? You've got to get over a majority of the Congress, but then you've got to get like 38 states. Like, I think it's like 3/4 of states or something like that. And so it's a good movie to show it. Hillary Swank's in it. But it's cool because if you're pro-life, you get really excited because Alice Paul is pro-life. But so ERA would pass Congress, and then it went to the states to get ratified, and it failed 3 states short of being ratified. And they had a time extension, and then they even failed from that. And so in this, like, we talked earlier about like this fear of Roe being overturned, the pro-abortion industry, on top of like the state legislation, they're throwing things up against the wall, because they're trying to figure out, what can they do, to ensure reproductive rights in a post-Roe America. And so one of the things has been, now let's repass ERA. And so there's been an effort to go into states and to pass it, even though the time period has expired. So 2 years ago, Nevada, with the help of Republicans, passed ERA, and they have like no idea what they're doing. ERA it's very short. It's like 3 passages. If you are a libertarian, you'll hate the ERA because it basically gives like all this overarching power to the federal government. But if you're pro-life, you shouldn't be concerned, but it doesn't say abortion in it. However, we know from legal scholars from the abortion industry themselves, actually a NARAL Pro-Choice America fundraising email just the other week proved my point, that what they want is that ERA be passed, and then they'll use the courts to say, well, this means that women have to have a special surgery in order to be equal to men, which I love how the feminist movement is the one saying that women are equal and women deserve equal rights, but then the same in one breath they say that, but in the next breath they say, well, women really are kind of inferior to men because they need a special surgery in order to be men, but whatever. So they're actually hoping to get ERA passed. So two states, for example, Connecticut and New Mexico, have passed state level ERAs and put ERAs into their state constitutions. Their state Supreme Courts found that because ERA was in their constitution, therefore taxpayers had to fund abortions in their state. So that's exactly what they're going to try to do federally. And so Nevada ratified ERA 2 years ago. Illinois did it last year. We engaged there. The pro-life movement wasn't really activated except for us. We lost that vote. They were trying to get the 38th state this legislative session. They tried in Virginia. We organized a letter, and we had a bunch of pro-life leaders sign a letter in December, and we actually had to go to the GOP in Virginia and say, look, like we understand you think you have a women problem, and you want to do this because you can say you're pro-woman, but by the way, they're always going to hate you anyway, so that doing this isn't going to work. And by the way, this is really everything related to Abortion Act. And so we were actually able to stop it there in Virginia. In January, we had a press conference and all that stuff, but they tried in Georgia. We took our letter to the legislature there in Georgia and let them know. We just found out a couple of days ago they're trying it in Missouri to be the 38th state. So we went and testified. And so I'm not too worried about it at this point, because even if they would say they got the 38th state, the time limit expired in like 1982. So there would be a lot of lawsuits. But there was a fundraising email that just went out from NARAL Pro-Choice America saying we need to repass it federally, and they want to like restart the clock. And there's a whole like ERA coalition. They came to our Capitol Hill briefing a couple of weeks ago and sat there with their arms crossed and making faces and rolling their eyes at me the whole time when I was speaking. But it was important because we had to have the briefing because during the State of the Union, the women in white, the Democratic lawmakers who all wore white, kind of trying to harp back to suffragist days, like they're suffragists or anything, but they all wore like ERA Now buttons. And so we got a call from some friends of Capitol Hill saying we need some talking points on this. What's going on? We're not sure. We thought that was dead decades ago. So you might see our ERA coming back in the States. In North Dakota, we're actually trying to get a resolution passed, and we want North Dakota to be the first one, and then have other states do it. That essentially says, we as a state recognize that the deadline for ERA passed and it already expired. So we had some students who went and actually testified on that. What else has got going on? Oh, Colorado. I was just in Denver for like 12 hours the other day. Colorado, which is very pro-abortion, is a very pro-abortion governor and legislative control right now. They're trying to pass a similar law to Washington State for basically letting Planned Parenthood come in and write their sex ed curriculum. That's something that's going on, and we really should be paid attention to. Washington State, I mean, it's a pretty sad story to see the transformation of Washington State just recently. Indiana. So North Dakota passed a dismemberment bill. Indiana is going to be passing it very soon. Ohio is getting ready to pass the heartbeat bill. Georgia just passed the heartbeat bill, and now like Melissa Milano and like 50 other stars from Hollywood, I guess, are going to like demand that they never shoot in Georgia ever again for films. Because they're so angry about this. But I mean, honestly, they all said they were going to leave the country if Trump was elected. So I'm still waiting for them to leave the country and be Canadians. So whatever. So we've got the heartbeat bill. I mean, those bills are going to be interesting because there hasn't been a heartbeat bill yet that's gone into effect, because every time they've been signed into law, they go right into the courts. There's, immediate injunction filed. In fact, Iowa, when they passed it and their pro-life governor, Kim Reynolds, signed it, when they filed the injunction, she said they weren't going to use state resources to defend it because she said it was going to lose. So we'll see what happens there in Georgia and Ohio. But obviously, once they're passed, they're going to be immediate injunctions, lawsuits. So we'll see if the state governor allows, the attorney general to defend it. Ohio has passed the Unborn Child Dignity Act, which I'm really excited about. That's a bill that's going to say that you have to bury the remains of preborn children. Can you imagine, like, it's so sad to have to even like try to think of this number, but can you imagine how many football fields full of babies we probably would have in our country if we actually had to bury every single baby that was aborted. I mean, how many football fields would that take up? I think I tried to figure that out one time, but that's significant. And I think that's something that, when people see that, like, oh yeah, like what do we do with the bodies, the broken bodies of all these children that we kill, that we terminate? So that's going to be interesting. Ohio has a dismemberment ban that they passed. I think it has an injunction going on right now, still happening. So we'll see what happens there in Ohio. But so there's a lot of different laws, still happening in the states and still being voted on. I'm looking at my list right now. I have, it's so bad right now. I have like a Google tracker. Oh, New Mexico. I have to tell for New Mexico. So New Mexico had a similar law to New York State. And New Mexico is not like a pro-life friendly place. I mean, it's probably, I would say, like the University of New Mexico, and I've gone on their campus. It's one of the most dark campuses you can go on to. It's very secular, very pro-abortion. And they're obviously, the Rocky Mountains is like the late-term abortion capital of the world between Denver and Albuquerque. But New Mexico, they actually defeated the similar bill than the New York State. And that was even going to be I think, go further, because it was going to force doctors to participate in abortion. So it was going to actually take away conscience rights. And it was Democrats, thank you, pro-life Democrats. I don't know if they were calling themselves pro-life Democrats, but it was Democrats who actually stopped the bill from passing. And so it was a big shock. I don't know if they're pro-life. I don't think they were, because it was a big shock to everybody that they stood up and voted against it. Probably was they just didn't want to have happened what happened in Virginia to happen in their state. So yeah, North Dakota, that was pretty awesome. California, my last day I want to talk about. So we fought last year. The pro-life generation rallied. There was a bill called SB 320. It was going to mandate the abortion pill be dispensed on every college campus. And what's interesting, the way they're selling it is like, oh, this is totally without taxpayer dollars, because like California's bankrupt because of liberal politics. But it's actually kind of a lie. So for the first 4 years, it's privately funded. And then after that, it goes to public funding. And Planned Parenthood, is written basically into the bill because, it would allow the schools to hire contractors who have experience dispensing the pill to come on campus. So we went to campuses last semester. We toured with toilet bowls and toilet seats and basically said, like, look, this is no place to have an abortion. And it was a really good talking point for us to use on California campuses, because even pro-choice students agreed with us. Like, yeah, that's pretty nasty. Like, no one should be doing that, and so it worked. We did lobby days and phone banking days. It worked in messaging, but it didn't work in Sacramento. And so the legislature there in California passed the bill, but it was the pro-choice governor, the Catholic pro-choice governor, Jerry Brown. I was in Ireland when it happened. I went to Ireland for like 24 hours to speak. Actually, I was there less than 24 hours, maybe like 20 hours. And he actually vetoed the law, and he used our actual talking point of, this is unnecessary. There's an abortion facility between 5 and 7 miles from every California college. And so this isn't a question of access. And so he vetoed it. Governor Newsom, the new governor of California, has during the campaign this fall pledged to sign it into law. So it was reintroduced this December. It's SB 24. We're fighting it. We've got a lobby day. There's actually a hearing coming up very soon on this, the first hearing. So we're going to be fighting that, and hopefully we can get others in the pro-life movement to join us this time. I think Live Action is going to be working with us a little bit on this. I spoke with the Secretary of Education at the White House during the President Trump's executive order signing of free speech and alerted her to this. We've had a meeting with the Department of Education. So hopefully we can get people talking about this, because this is a huge issue. If it passes in California, and they've already been very clear, they want this to pass in other states across the country. So this is kind of the test ground for this. So, California is not going to be the only place where this stops. I mean, this is going to fundamentally transform, the pro-life movement, because, we spend all of our time and our money a lot of times, sidewalk counseling in front of the abortion facility, putting the Planned Parenthood out of business. But how are you going to do that when abortions are on college campuses and they're in the campus health centers? And so they know that. I mean, they know that these freestanding brick and mortar abortion facilities are going to go away, and they're going to be a thing of the past. And so they know they've got to, make abortion, more tolerable, right? So that's why they're telling medical students, like, well, you don't have to be an abortionist. You're just prescribing a pill, and it's not an abortion clinic, and don't set up a freestanding clinic. Just be in a practice with 8 other doctors in a high-rise building. And so they're making it. They don't want to have these easy targets like abortion facilities are for us to picket and protest and sidewalk counsel and pray in front of. And so this is going to be significant. So we're going to be fighting that. There's also another bill in California that's been introduced on the student ID cards, where they're going to have I think there's going to be a suicide prevention hotline number on the back of their ID cards. Now they're going to have a Planned Parenthood phone number as well. So not good stuff going on in California. Please, if you are religious, and probably 99% of you listening to this are, please pray. It's going to be an uphill battle in New York, in California. Whatever happens in California, just like whatever happens in New York, it gets exported to other states. So that's a little bit of an update for you of what's going on in the states. I hope you understand now, why states matter. Takeaways for you who've tuned in or watching or listening. You need to be paying attention to what's going on in your state legislature. Pay attention to races. Consider running or recruit somebody else to run for key races in your state house, because state houses matter. State legislation matters. And we can stop a lot of this. We can save lives if pro-lifers control the state house, right? So this is important. So pay attention. Make sure, once you get an email or a text message from me or somebody saying, hey, we have to go here, the lobby, the state house, can you join us? Take the damn day off work and go and make this a priority. I can't emphasize to you how important it is. It's about who shows up. And the fact in some of these states that it's only pro-life students who show up. I mean, it's great. Having pro-life students as the forefront is great for the narrative, because it, dispels everything they try to say we are as pro-lifers. But we need more people with us. It can't just be us all the time. So we need you to go to the state house and pay attention to what's happening in the state house. And you know what? It's really cool about your local House of Delegates or House of Representatives or whatever your state calls your house and your center. They're actually pretty accessible. You can find them at church. You can see them at the grocery store. You can walk to their house. You can knock on their door. You can call them on the phone, and you can get active in this. This is what we need to do as the pro-life movement is. I understand how important Washington, D.C. is, and it is very important what happens in Washington. But we can save lives. You can save lives right now in your state. So thanks for tuning in to this first episode of Explicitly Pro-Life. Hopefully I didn't bore you. Hopefully you found this something insightful, found it interesting. We're going to be coming to you, I think, every week with another episode, with another topic. So I hope you will subscribe and tune in. Thanks, guys.